everything you need to know about XRP. Is it worth investing in? Is it worth investing in for the long term? We're breaking down XRP into its basic components so that even someone who knows nothing about this project will know whether to invest in it. So if you want to find out what XRP is, why it's good, why it's such a controversial project, and why I believe it will last as long as Bitcoin, then this episode is for you. So without further ado, let's get started. But before we move on to the charts and the most important things, let's talk a bit about Ripple and what's most crucial in this episode. Namely, Ripple is a technology company based in San Francisco, founded in 2012, specializing in blockchain solutions for cross-border payments. And the Ripple project actually has its roots, listen, even before the era of Bitcoin. The original version, known as Ripple Pay, was created in 2004 as a peer-to-peer network. And XRP is the native cryptocurrency of the XRP Ledger Network, or XRPL, a decentralized open-source blockchain platform. XRP serves as a bridge currency, enabling fast and inexpensive international transactions with settlement times of 3 to 5 seconds and costs amounting to fractions of a cent. We'll discuss more about the costs in the summary. And RippleNet, which is Ripple's payment network, connects banks, payment service providers, digital asset exchanges and corporations, offering real-time global payments. And here, my dear viewers, there's something quite interesting because XRP could therefore be considered an RWA, or real-world asset. And of course, the XRPL also supports tokens, cryptocurrencies, and other units of value such as airline miles or phone minutes, which further expands its use in the RWA context. It's also worth emphasizing here that Ripple and XRPL are separate entities. They are two completely different things. Ripple is a company, while XRPL is a technology. So now let's quickly move on to the history of Ripple, because I think this will be very important for many people who are not familiar with this project. The development of XRPL began in 2011, initiated by David Schwartz, 𝗕𝗪𝗏𝗕𝗏, and 𝗕𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏, who discussed on public forums the need for a faster alternative to Bitcoin. In June 2012, XRPL was launched with 100 billion initial XRP tokens, of which 80 billion were given to the company OpenCoin, which was renamed Ripple Labs in 2013, and then simply Ripple in 2015. Chris Larsen, co-founder and former CEO until 2016, was succeeded by Brad Garlinghouse, who has been the head of Ripple to this day. The early years of the project focused on building partnerships with banks, which resulted in collaborations, among others, with Santander at that time. In 2015, Ripple encountered regulatory issues, including a fine from FinCEN for operating an unregistered money service. And of course, a key event was the well-known lawsuit filed by the SEC in December 2020, which ended in a settlement after 5 years in 2025. But let's now take a moment to talk about what RippleNet is. And RippleNet is not a single blockchain, listen, but rather a network of payment solutions for banks and financial institutions. It consists of 3 main products: xCurrent, which is communication and settlement of interbank transactions; xRapid, now known as on-demand liquidity, which uses XRP for currency liquidity; and finally, xVia, which is a universal interface for connecting to RippleNet. And all transactions on RippleNet are recorded on the public XRP Ledger Network, which operates separately from traditional blockchains. The XRPL is a decentralized public ledger that, listen to this, is based on consensus and does not require mining. Transactions are confirmed within 3 to 4 seconds by a group of independent validators. Any network participant can run a validation node. Users utilize the so-called North List, or UNL, a list of trusted validators, to speed up all these verifications. This model enables very fast settlements and low energy consumption. Currently, the network typically supports around 120 validators from various organizations around the world, which ensures security, transactions, and increasing decentralization within this project. And of course, in practice, XRPL allows not only for transfers of XRP tokens, but also for the issuance and trading of any tokenized assets or currencies, meaning XRP actually has a very broad range of capabilities here. And naturally, we can't forget that the network has a built-in DEX exchange. Anyone can set an exchange rate, a so-called offer, between XRP and other tokens or currencies. And smart contract functionality is being gradually developed, for example, with plans for deployments, extensions, meaning these extensions, and the EVM module specifically for Ethereum contracts. But before we get to the main substance of this episode, the part most of you are probably waiting for, let's talk a bit more about tokenomics. XRP has a fixed predetermined supply of 100 billion tokens, which were created all at once at the launch of the network. Out of this pool, 80%, that is 80 billion XRP, went to Ripple Labs. Some of it has already been sold or distributed, while 20% remained in the initial circulation. And to prevent excessive supply and potential inflation, Ripple introduced the escrow mechanism, which allows them to maintain control over the flow of tokens. Currently, about 55 billion XRP are locked in escrow smart contracts. Every month, 1 billion XRP is unlocked, of which usually about 20% is sold, given to partners, or used to cover Ripple's operational costs, while the remaining portion is locked back into escrow for future purposes. Thanks to this, it can be said that the total supply in circulation has increased gradually according to a set schedule. And unlike Bitcoin or Ethereum, Ripple does not introduce new issuance, meaning there is simply no possibility of mining. All tokens have existed from the very beginning. However, every transaction on the network involves a very small transaction fee, for example 0.00001 XRP, which is permanently burned, that is, destroyed and does not go into any reward pool. This means that each transaction slightly reduces the total supply of XRP, although the fees are extremely low. The burning mechanism limits transaction spam and has a deflationary effect in the long term, which is a very, very good mechanism. And that's exactly why, if you look on CoinMarketCap, you'll see that the max supply is 100 billion XRP, but the total supply is 99.98 billion. Let's move on, my dear friends, to the next very important point, namely ETFs. And speaking of XRP, it's worth mentioning that the SEC is awaiting a decision on the application to launch ETF products specifically for XRP. According to Polymarkets, the chance of this product being launched is as high as 98%, and these odds are fueled, among other things, by the fact that CME Group introduced XRP futures contracts on May 19, 2025. Several reputable investment firms have submitted applications for an XRP ETF, including companies such as WisdomTree, whose application is currently under review with a potentially lengthy decision process, Franklin Templeton, which is awaiting a decision from the SEC on June 17, 2025, and of course our Grayscale decision has been postponed until October 2025. Other firms like Bitwise, 21 Shares, and Canary Capital have also submitted applications and are waiting for a response. So the question is not whether XRP will get an ETF, but when XRP will get its first ETF and how this will help the project increase its price and market capitalization. Now let's move on to the XRP team, because it's the people who make this project, and Ripple Labs, originally founded as OpenCoin, has been connected with the founders of XRPL from the very beginning. The key figures are Brett Garlinghouse, who has served as CEO since 2015, as well as co-founders Chris Larsen and 𝗕𝗫𝗪𝗏. Chris Larsen, who was the first CEO of Ripple, now serves as executive chairman of the board. Since 2013, 𝗕𝗫𝗪𝗏 has led Ripple's technical department. The CTO later left the company to start a competing project, namely 𝗕𝗪𝗪𝗏. The team of co-founders also includes David Schwartz, chief cryptographer and architect of XRPL, as well as 𝗕𝗪𝗪𝗏. Both of them still work at XRPL. And now let's move on to the next point, which is the Ripple versus SEC case. In December 2020, Ripple and its co-founders became involved in a high-profile dispute with the US Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC accused Ripple of illegally selling XRP as an unregistered securities offering, amounting to approximately $1.3 billion. As a consequence, the price of XRP naturally dropped and trading of this asset was restricted on various exchanges. In July 2023, Judge Analisa Torres ruled that XRP used in public sales is not a security, but large-scale sales to institutions should be subject to SEC regulations. And of course, Ripple appealed part of the verdict. In March 2025, the SEC, now under new leadership, decided not to pursue further appeals and agreed to a settlement. Ripple was to pay a fine of $50 million, with a previous indication of $125 million, and implement additional procedures for institutional sales. As part of the agreement, Ripple did not admit any wrongdoing. The consequence of the settlement was the end of a legal battle that had lasted over 4 years, and the market responded positively to this outcome. The status of XRP as an unregistered security was partially resolved, which signals greater regulatory stability and may pave the way for new financial products based on XRP. And now we move on to RLUSD. And an example of this, listen, is the RLUSD stablecoin, because not everyone knows this, but XRP actually has its own stablecoin. That is an official US dollar stablecoin issued by Ripple itself on its own blockchain, the XRP Ledger. Announced in 2024 as a key element of the strategy to expand payment infrastructure and asset tokenization. It is fully backed by dollar reserves, of course, and is intended to serve as a regulated, transparent, and fast settlement medium within the Ripple ecosystem, both for individual users and financial institutions, So, my dear viewers, we'll see what the future holds for this stablecoin. Will it perhaps become a market leader? Ripple also plans to expand RL-USD to other Ethereum-compatible blockchains such as ETH and Avalanche through multi-chain tokens. However, the main environment for RL-USD remains the XRP ledger. And of course, this stablecoin is meant to compete with USD Circle and USDT Tether in the regulated payment space, especially in the institutional banking and fintech sector, where in my personal opinion, XRP has the greatest chance. But now, let's move on to partners XRP, because that is also a very important element. And RippleNet has, listen to this, gained over 300 clients in the financial sector worldwide. Among the network's users are both large banks and fintech companies. For example, in the US, the first bank to join RippleNet was PNC. Well-known institutions collaborating with RippleNet include, among others, Santander in Spain and Brazil, Santander Charter Ed in the UK, American Express together with Santander UK, SBI Holdings in Japan, the main investor in Ripple, as well as Westpac and BMO in Australia and Canada. In Asia, Ripple works with the SBI conglomerate. The company SBI Remit uses XRP liquidity specifically for international transactions. Outside the banking sector, money transfer companies like MoneyGram are also important. They used on-demand liquidity tools, specifically XRapid, for currency payments between 2019 and 2020, although due to US regulations, they discontinued further cooperation. In addition, many fintech companies and new payment startups are integrating Ripple solutions, and the acquisition of Airport in 2019 allowed them to expand their global reach. So, Ripple statistics are quite interesting, as it is currently the fourth largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization, at around $130 billion. It's actually the third largest if we don't count USDT, which is a stablecoin. According to XRPL data, hundreds of thousands of transactions are processed every day. In recent quarters, network activity has been growing dynamically, as the number of active addresses has increased by 142% quarter over quarter, and the average daily number of transactions by 13%. XRPL has low transaction fees, meaning the cost is actually just a fraction of an XRP, which makes it an efficient tool for micropayments and mass adoption. And here, my dear friends, the situation is quite interesting because when it comes to XRP, it is currently one of the best performing altcoins, especially after the impulsive breakout, which, as we discussed on Discord for over a year, was a good opportunity to accumulate between 30 and 50 cents. Of course, I'm still holding on to that batch. I sold some XRP a little above $3. That was literally just 20% of my position. At this point, I'm still holding the rest. For me, XRP is going to be something like, I'd say, a part of my retirement plan. I don't intend to sell XRP in this cycle or in any of the next ones, at least for some time, of course. Specifically, now this capital will possibly be rolled over by me, or I might even buy more if the price drops low. But for sure, XRP is a coin I want to hold for the long term. For short-term players, the area around 2.11 or actually 1.95 could be a good and interesting spot to potentially open their positions on the futures market. But for me, when it comes to the long term, to buy XRP again, the price would not be higher than 1.5, although ideally, I would prefer to buy XRP below $1 again for long-term holding. And here, only patience will win. Or rather, those who are patient will win. XRP, as I said, remains one of the best performing altcoins on the market due to its low volatility at the moment. Maybe for some people that's a bad thing, but what's good is that after such an impulsive breakout, we are actually maintaining a fairly high level all the time. But now, my dear viewers, moving on to development, because the project, despite having already achieved a lot, does not intend to stop there and is actively building its position in the banking and financial services sector. And I'm telling you this because it's one of the few projects, if not one of just a handful that I can count on the fingers of one hand, that could actually be held for the long term. For me, long term means the next several or even more years because I fundamentally and strongly believe in this project. I believe it can truly make a significant real-world impact, so it's definitely worth it. If not the whole package, then at least a part of it is worth holding on to for dear life, as they say. And the development of Ripple and XRPL in the coming years is focused on expanding institutional DeFi functions and payment infrastructure. According to the official roadmap for 2025, plans include, among other things, the introduction of an additional identity permission system known as credentials, which will expand the existing decentralized identities, or DIDs. This will make it possible to create so-called permission dexes and domains for institutions with AML requirements, which is a very significant development. Listen, a new standard called multipurpose tokens will be introduced, enabling the tokenization of assets with specific logic, for example, securities with an expiration date, which is already a huge topic in itself. Lending functions will also be added, integrating liquidity from Ripple Payments DEX and the RLUSD stablecoin. Additionally, the network will receive an extensions mechanism that allows developers to attach any code to existing XRPL transactions and objects. And of course, a virtual machine based on Ethereum will also be created. So, from a broader perspective, Ripple declares that it will continue to promote cooperation with central banks considering CBDCs, fintechs, and exchange operators. Hence the support for RLUSD stablecoins, the US dollar, the euro, and of course, open APIs for financial institutions. But, well, there are no projects that haven't faced criticism, so here XRP has also gone through quite significant, you could say, waves of criticism. Although Ripple and XRP have gained considerable popularity in the financial and banking sector, the project is not free from controversy. One of the main accusations against Ripple is the high centralization of XRP supply. The company Ripple Labs controls a significant portion of the tokens, originally receiving as much as 80 billion out of the total 100 billion XRP. Even with the existence of escrow mechanisms, critics argue that Ripple has the ability to influence the market by selling large batches of tokens, which introduces volatility and undermines trust in the so-called free market. Additionally, XRPL validators do not receive, listen to this, any economic reward for their work, which calls into question the long-term motivation to maintain the node infrastructure. But let's move on to where this project is actually, getting its funding from. Because they have enormous funds for development. And Ripple Labs, is one of the best funded blockchain startups in the history of cryptocurrencies. The company has raised over $300 million in multiple rounds of venture capital funding. The main investors include Andreessen Horowitz, a top VC fund from Silicon Valley, IDG Capital Partners, Google Ventures, SBI Holdings, a Japanese financial giant, and also Ripple's strategic partner in Asia, Santander Innoventures, the Santander Bank Innovation Fund, and Santander Chartered Ventures, Accenture, as well as other financial institutions. Thanks to this backing, Ripple has not only financed the development of RippleNet and XRPL, but also carries out regulatory, research, and marketing activities on a global scale. And now, XRP versus CBDC. Since Ripple is working intensively with central banks on the design and testing of central bank digital currencies, the company has created a dedicated platform for issuing and managing CBDCs based on XRPL technology. Among the most important projects are Bhutan, in cooperation with the Royal Monetary Authority, a national digital currency was tested. Palau Ripple is supporting the issuance of the Palau stablecoin, or PSC, as a public digital currency. Colombia, Georgia, Montenegro pilot programs for the tokenization of national currencies are being conducted there. New partnerships with governments in Africa and Latin America are currently under negotiation. Ripple offers private XRPL technology with interoperability features, allowing institutions to maintain control over issuance and compliance with AML and KYC regulations. The company states that it aims to serve as an infrastructure provider for future global currency systems. But maybe let's compare to wrap up XRP, Algo, and Stellar, because these are actually three of the biggest projects that are also part of ISO 20022. And in the world of financial blockchains, this trio is most often compared. From a technical standpoint, Stellar uses a similar consensus algorithm, SCP, and also has a fixed supply of 100 billion tokens. The main difference is actually the target group, because Ripple focuses on large financial institutions and interbank payments, while Stellar promotes peer-to-peer transfers for individuals and small businesses. It tries to be more, you could say, decentralized and to simplify procedures for individual users, which is also good because it's not only institutions that need the help of blockchain here, but also people like us. Algorand, on the other hand, is a blockchain focused on fast payment settlement and scalability. It uses pure proof of stake. Algorand is fully permissionless and is not controlled by any commercial company. Among other things, it has partnerships for issuing stablecoins such as USDC on Algorand and supports CBDC testing by banks. Compared to XRP, Algorand's consensus algorithm theoretically allows for greater throughput, but the Algorand network has a lower level of adoption among banks than Ripple. So here, my dear viewers, Ripple is truly a huge project. Can it be called an altcoin? Probably yes, however. It doesn't belong to the group of altcoins that, in my opinion, won't survive in the near future. I believe it is a very forward-looking coin. I believe this is a coin that is definitely worth investing in, not all of your money, of course, but certainly accumulating small amounts over time for later on when the XRP ledger is actually used on a mass scale, whether in financial institutions or, so to speak, in in our everyday lives by us personally. At that point, especially when ETFs are launched, in my opinion, we can expect a significant increase in the capitalization of this project. So, my dear viewers, this episode was very much focused on providing information. That was exactly the point. The goal was for you to learn what XRP is, why it's good, and why you can believe in it over the long term. Those of you who watch this episode and decide, yes, that's great. Those who don't, that's also great, because the investment decision for the near future is entirely up to you whether you want to invest in such a project or not. Of course, this material is not sponsored. Personally, I hold XRP myself, as I mentioned. I rotate my capital quite heavily into XRP, but it's a coin that I will definitely be holding, so to speak, for my retirement. So if you enjoyed the material, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell, and subscribe. And leave a comment if you want to see this type of episode on this channel. Or maybe you don't need these kinds of informational episodes. So let me know, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. I wish you a wonderful weekend.